Thank you for all being here. My name is Mark Sloat. I'm currently the program manager for field services and outreach, which includes the animal protection unit for Austin Animal Services. You didn't read our bios. We'll give you a little bit of background about ourselves. I've been in animal rescue since 1985. I ran my own rescue for a while in Minnesota, about 24 years. I also did contract animal control up there. And that's really where I cut my teeth on some of the programs that we do here and measuring the effect of keeping animals home so they didn't have to be in my little shelter. Since being at, I think I've been at Austin since 2012. April and I were co-workers there, and helping learn how to support no-kill in a municipal environment has been a challenge, but also very rewarding.
Good afternoon. I'm April Moore. I'm the engagement manager currently with the City of Austin, and in my role currently, I oversee the Pet Resource Center, our neighborhood level pilot program. I'm not sure how I did that. And also our customer service program. Previously, as Mark said, I worked alongside him in field services. I spent about 15 years of my career in field services, over a decade as a supervisor. And during my time in field services, I played an integral role in transitioning the program from one that was really based in punitive measures to one that took an engagement-based focus on service delivery in our community. So in addition to the things that we've already mentioned here, Mark and I are also Maddie's apprenticeship instructors. So if you indulge me just a brief moment, I want to plug our program. We have the fortunate opportunity, thanks to Maddie's, to offer an apprenticeship that introduces students to our engagement-based philosophies, along with taking a deep dive into all of the processes and programs and practices that that a program would need to implement in order to be successful within their jurisdiction. And that's no matter the size of the program. So we take about 3 days to really take a look at what taking a engagement-based philosophy looks like and applying it. And so if anyone is interested in that apprenticeship, let's see here, it's going to be held March 25th through the 27th, and also April 22nd through the 24th. You can sign up here on site at the booth right outside of what I think is Salon 5. I had entertained like blocking the doors and making everybody sign up before you leave, but thought that might be frowned upon. So at any rate, if you're interested after the program, feel free to go sign up. Now, back to our program. Today we're going to talk briefly about what it looks like for us to support and sustain the highest level of life-saving through our community-based approach. We're going to talk about how managing daily shelter capacity is really dependent on two main things. It's ensuring, one, that we are sheltering only those pets that are in greatest need, and two, that our outtakes or our outcomes are outpacing our intakes. And our engaged animal protection program impacts both of those components through our service delivery and also through integration with shelter operations. So when we talk about our philosophy, our approach to field services delivery is really rooted in the idea that a professional animal control program can enhance animal welfare, and it is what helps keep communities no-kill. Traditional animal control programs tend to be rooted in punitive-based measures, so citations and impoundments. And because those are largely transactional type approaches, it really limits opportunities for conversations. An engagement-based approach creates chances and opportunities and encourages dialogues between our officers and our community members to solve for root causes of whatever animal-related issue is that they're facing. This engagement-based approach supports our community life-saving ethic by, one, solving for those long-term solutions to create safer communities. If we're having conversations and we're identifying root causes and we're applying the resources and the information they need to work through whatever barrier they're facing, we're solving issues for the long term. Because we're solving for the long term, we're creating that safer community, we're creating that healthier environment for that pet and that person. We're empowering our community members as well to resolve their animal-related issues because we're we're providing them opportunities, learning opportunities, and we're working through their issues with them and helping them to problem solve through whatever barrier they're facing. So when they face it in the future, they're already equipped to handle it. We're empowering our officers to connect to community members and connect them to the resources and information that they need to promote their care and retention of their pet. But we're doing so without negating concerns around animal cruelty and neglect, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a bit. And then lastly, we're positively affecting life-saving within our shelter. That's you, buddy.
For a little background, for those that aren't from the Austin area, in 2010, the Austin City Council passed the 34-point no-kill implementation plan, which placed a moratorium on killing for cage space. This plan outlined strategies and programs to support life-saving within the shelter, but it did not provide a roadmap for animal protection at all. This meant that we had to ask ourselves, what do we need to change, or what needs to change to support life savings? All of our practices, policies, and procedures were reconsidered through a life-saving lens. With no additional resources, staff, or budget, we had to accept that punitive measures were unsustainable in terms of life outcome goals and adherence to this new life-saving goal. So what did this look like?
What it looked like for us was a complete program restructure. What we had to do was reprioritize around what was important to our community. And what was important for our community were essentially two main things. There was primarily life-saving and redefining what our animals in need look like. We wanted to preserve, protect, promote that pet or that human-animal bond. And then secondly, making time for conversation so that we could achieve that first point. It was through some data analysis that we were able to identify gaps in our service delivery. And because we were able to identify those gaps, we were able to reprioritize our service response to certain calls, restructure how we categorize calls, and we were able to reallocate staff, resources. And what that did for us is it enabled us to then free up time. And that time was important in order for us to be able to have meaningful conversations with our community members in the field. For our staff, we emphasized the value in collaborating with shelter teams. We had spent many years living in silos and living separate, and we were really sort of hyper-focused on our own individual success without regard to how our success was affecting the shelter. And so if you think about us operating our program under this sort of traditional model, our success looking like impoundments, our success looking like citations, the more successful our program was, the more stress we put on the shelter. And so resetting this idea that we needed to be collaborative and integrated with shelter operations and what our program did, how it impacted the shelter, was a bit of a hard reset for our staff. We also had to work to reposition ourselves as a partner in the community. We had to work to rebuild trust within our community. We wanted our community members to be willing to have open conversations with us so that we could get to those root causes and connect them to the information or the resources that they needed, because we wanted to keep our pets in our home. Or in their home, not my home, their home. As leaders, we had to seek out strategies to balance that engagement approach with our enforcement responsibilities. And we had to institutionalize life-saving through SOPs. When one of our more recent leaders had first joined our program, she helpfully pointed out that we were doing a very good job, but the vast majority of our processes were personality-based. And so we had to work to really institutionalize what we were doing so that no matter who was filling our shoes, we knew that the program would continue at the level of success that it was. So as we began the transition from this punitive-based program to one that was engagement-focused, we also recognized the importance of a culture shift within our group. Now, I'll be honest, this didn't come very easy, as culture shifts never do. I shouldn't say never. They often don't. We had to create a culture shift both internally and, as I stated, within our community. Animal control agencies historically have been rooted in public safety and health laws and/or health laws. And so the role of animal control officers was to protect people, which often resulted in citations and impoundments. Again, the idea was to remove the threat. So the resolution to these calls for concern often just resulted in an animal going away. So in order to begin thinking differently about our role in the community, we had to think about how we described ourselves, and we needed to be intentional about it. In Austin, we intentionally refer to our officers as animal protection officers. They're not animal control officers. They're not out to control our animals. They're out to protect our animals. Again, they're out to protect and preserve that human-animal bond. And so they may be tasked with investigating conflicts that arise from reports of violations of these various animal control laws that we're responsible for, but their approach to that call resolution is not rooted in this idea that they're going to control the animal at the heart of the situation. We spent some time also really looking at our hiring processes. We needed to make sure that we had the right people sitting in this role. We needed people who were people. We didn't need necessarily people who would choose to spend time with animals any day of the week and twice on Sunday. We needed people that could talk to somebody. After all, it's the people that help us resolve the pet issues, right? So we recognize that technical skills can be learned by and large, and so what we started hiring for were soft skills. We wanted people that were non-judgmental, were empathetic, were trustworthy, were engaging. We needed folks that could connect to people and build strong relationships within our community. And we needed people that could build those relationships very quickly. That's one of the ways in which they stay safe as well. So as leaders, we had to make it as easy as possible for our officers to connect to our community, and we needed to make it very easy for them to connect the resources that our community members needed. So we also worked diligently to remove any sort of internal barriers. And so, as an example, and Mark will talk a bit more about this later, but we have a spay-neuter program, we have a fencing program, and one of the requirements on the application was that an animal be spayed and neutered before they qualify for fencing. Well, it seems a little bit silly if we want to keep an animal contained to its yard that we would limit its ability to roam until it's spayed and neutered. So we removed that barrier completely, and we just said, you know what? We're going to start the conversation around helping you keep your animal home. And so we would, if somebody applied for fencing, we didn't require spay-neuter. It was just an opportunity for us to start a conversation. And we could go back later, and once we've built up a relationship with that family, we could go back later and continue the conversation.
The importance of building the positive relationships and how to do that almost goes without saying. But we build positive relationships through engaging with social and community groups, by being present, be consistent, and be empathetic and genuine. One of the ways that we're consistent is our animal protection officers are staged in the same geographic area for 6 months at a time. So they get to know the community they're serving, they get to know the pets they're serving, and they get to actually go to some of the events that go on in those communities. We create opportunities to build these positive relationships by making time for conversations. When this all first started, our average time on call was about 8 minutes. Animal control officers were running from 8 o'clock in the morning till 4 o'clock at night, and all they did was run calls. Our average time on calls right now is about 10 minutes. It varies, what part of the city. But that's a huge amount of time when you're looking at an average. We run about 60,000 calls a year. So giving the officers the time and the freedom to make these engagements and have conversations with people, and being able to go back and check up on things without necessarily having a reason to have to go there, not just responding to a call makes a huge difference. This shows, again, consistency. We're empathetic and genuine. We really do want to help these people, because if the pets don't come to the shelter, we don't have to find them a home. We create opportunities to build these positive relationships by making time for the conversations. And through effective resource allocation, like the time field officers spend doing these things, we're able to make time to engage our community members in problem-solving conversations aimed at identifying root causes and applying long-term solutions that keep the pets with the family. And the community has a safer and is a healthier environment. These people are going to own pets. So the old adage of going there and removing the pet removes the problem, it doesn't work, because they're pet-centric people. They're going to get more pets. So let's help them be successful with the one they have. When we talk about protecting the human-animal bond, we're not only talking about creating healthier communities and promoting public safety. We consider the intent and not the outcome. Protecting the human-animal bond, creating healthier communities, and promoting public safety by keeping and connecting pets with their people. So we do a return in field, and that's heavily emphasized. By returning in the field, we not only do we keep the pet with the owner, we now know who owns the pet, but we also, it's a huge cost savings benefit. Last year we had an emphasis on it. We had an event afterwards held for the successful number of RTOs in the field. But again, it's each time you return an animal in the field, instead of bringing it to the shelter, it's an opportunity to have a conversation with that pet owner and to help them understand help us understand and them why their pet was getting out and how we can help solve that. Did you want me to talk about the cost right now? I know where's that. Just for instance, for return in the field in the city of Austin, it averages about $50 a day for a medium to large dog. So if you extrapolate the math in my benefit, because it's my program, 951 dogs, I think it was, we RTO'd last year at $50 a day, an average length of stay of 15 days. That's $730,000. So you can see how that benefits the city, and that's scalable whether you take in 500 dogs a year or 5,000 dogs a year or 15,000. The more you can keep home, the better the opportunity you have to build that confidence in the community. And when the public start understanding that even if you put a dog in the truck, you're still going to bring it home, now they start that trust. When the neighbors see you walk up and ask, do you know whose dog this is? Now you've started, that's another way to build trust in the community. And so when you have people coming out to the truck and actually telling us where the dog lives because they know we want to get it home, or they have the owner's phone number, that's a huge success. And again, it helps by having the same officers in the area for long lengths of time, 6 months or more.
So some of the concerns that are occasionally presented is, what do you do about neglect complaints? How do you manage cruelty complaints? And we sort of take this approach in Austin that by and large our community, the folks that live within our community are good enough pet owners. They desire to do right by their animals. And given enough resources or information, if they're in a difficult position, a difficult spot, and maybe they need a little bit of help, if we can provide them whatever help they need, if they're going to choose to do right by the animal, then that animal's in the right home. That home is good enough. If we see that the animal is thriving, then that home is appropriate. And so we spend a lot of time, as Mark said, having conversations with individuals and building capacity in our community through information sharing and through resource delivery, and by building up our community members and helping them become better pet owners and helping them become better resourced. So for that subset of our community that struggles or goes through acute crisis, when we're able to step in and partner with them and help them problem solve through whatever challenge they're having, then they're better equipped in the future to work through that barrier. Do you want to add to that at all?
What policies or processes promote life-saving within our community? One of them I already mentioned is the Return in the Field program. One of One of the unique things with Austin is our home quarantine for bite investigations. Austin's known for its bats, so we do a lot of rabies exposure investigations, and this is anything from an animal bite to a cat or a dog might come home with a bat in its mouth or maybe tangled with a raccoon. So in those investigations, because of state law, we have to quarantine that animal even if it's current on its rabies vaccine. So we have the option under the state law, if they're not in violation of any city or state statute or code, we can do a home quarantine. And we emphasize home quarantines as much as we can. We prefer, again, it helps build trust, but the pet owner knows their pet the best. We know that that pet is going to do the best at home. We don't need it in the shelter, and we're always full. So it benefits everybody if we can help keep that animal where it lives, where it's comfortable, and where if it did, say, get bit by a raccoon or something, there may be some recovery time or whatever. It's better to be at home where it can do that. Quarantine is expensive if you have to go to a private vet, and as a city impound, we have to take in unowned or unknown-owned dogs that bite or cats, and so we want to keep those kennels available for those dogs that have to be there, those cats that have to be there. One of the other things we do is we do all dangerous and vicious dog investigations. We run that process completely in-house. We try to help people even with the dangerous dogs. There's some places, like where I came from in Minnesota, most people with dangerous dogs, it was recommended they euthanize. We really didn't want registered dangerous dogs in our jurisdictions. Here we work with the people and we help them. And again, we help them be successful. We do the yard audits, we do the fence inspections. If they have questions, we're willing to work with them. We're trying not to be the bad guy, we're trying to be the advocate for public safety. Whether that means keeping that dog in the home and behind proper fencing and containment, or if there's a different route for that dog. But we always want to advocate for public safety, but also the pet safety and success. Excuse me. April mentioned the fencing program. We have a fencing and doghouse program. This fencing program was initially set up for tethered dogs, and we saw a need. Again, we looked at data, we looked at needs of the community, and we adapted. We made it more than what it ever was thought to be, and expanded it. And again, we're building that trust with our community. We're helping people be engaged with their own process of solving their own problems. And so, when it's bitter cold and people start complaining about dog houses or dogs being outside with no dog house, sometimes those dogs they're never going to be house dogs. They're going to always be yard dogs, and that's okay. But we need to help them be successful by having that dog be able to be safe and be comfortable, or the cat to be safe and comfortable in whatever housing we can provide for them. So we have free dog houses that we deliver, and the dog house can be delivered by the APO that is on the call, or it can be delivered by our tethering and neglect officer. It doesn't matter. Or they can come to the shelter and pick them up. We also do wildlife transport. We handle all the injured wildlife within the jurisdiction that we are in. And this is, again, helps the people understand when we do a wildlife call, we have wildlife officers that are dedicated to just helping people understand how to live successfully alongside wildlife. And that's another thing that makes Austin unique. The animal protection, we don't just remove wildlife from the situation, we help people be successful by living around the wildlife so they can understand how they can have their pets, and you can still have coyotes and raccoons and opossums run through your yard and it's perfectly fine. We help people understand that. And again, it's part of building that relationship with the community and understanding how they can be safe and live in that community with their pets and the wildlife.
And I just want to add, when we talk about our dangerous dog and vicious dog process, certainly we are tasked under state law to investigate reports of dangerous dogs. And the law allows us to, just on the surface, allows us to make that declaration in-house. But one of the things we did as a program is we sat down and we said, what's the intent of this law? The intent is to keep the community safe, to prevent people from harm, right? We don't want dogs running out and biting people or chasing people or causing them to fear that they're going to be harmed in some way. And so what we realized is these reports of dangerous dogs and these reports of animals getting out and attacking others is really just another opportunity for us to have conversations and to build healthier communities. And so we changed our process several years back, and what it involves is really connecting with not only our complaining party, but connecting with our our pet owner and trying to have conversations before we get to a point where we're having a third-party administrative hearing to work through the complaint. And if we can find resolution before we get to that administrative hearing, if we can find resolution through delivery of resources or through information sharing or through helping two parties have a conversation, then that's what we do. Because the intent is to create a safer space for everyone, right? So, we certainly have it within our power to just stamp dangerous on any dog that is outside of its property and running at large and harming others or worrying them. But that doesn't actually get at the intent of the law, and arguably it doesn't create a safer community for us. So after the implementation of the no-kill implementation, or after the implementation of the no-kill implementation plan, it's an implementation twice, 3 times. I should stop that. We began integrating more with shelter operations out of necessity, but also because it was the right thing to do, frankly, in order to sustain no-kill within our community. And what that looks like for us today is being part of the conversation around managing the shelter population and improving outcomes. We know that about 70% of our dog population that comes into our shelter, they come in as strays. We also know that we don't have packs of wild dogs running around our jurisdiction. Maybe we have one, but we certainly don't have the number of unowned animals in our community that would equal what we have living in our shelters. So these dogs that we're sheltering belong to somebody. They somehow separated from their owner, the bond got disrupted, and now they're stuck. And we also know that about half of our shelter population, those that are on site, the medium-large dogs on site, have been with us for over 30 days. So they're not moving back home, and they're not moving into new homes. And so one of the things that animal protection does really well is we do a really good job at connecting to our community and finding people and having conversations. And so we use opportunities around discussions for achieving outcomes to pull in the animal protection team to see if they can support in maximizing outcomes for animals. And so we use them strategically to try to apply programs and ideas to help move our animal population along. And certainly by helping our animals move out sooner than 30 plus days also ends up reducing our length of stay. And for a shelter our size, where we experience 17,000 about animals annually, it's imperative that we stay on top of outcomes and that our outcomes outpace our intakes.
One of the things that we do everything very diligently, and we do when we do these programs, we're very specific about why we're doing things. We don't do things just to see what, throw stuff at the wall and see if it sticks. I think Leanne thought that sometimes, but one of the things that we've done, and April talks about how we understand, I think what we understand better than most people, most animal protection units or animal control units, is we understand how what we do in the field directly affects every other work group in the shelter. So one of the things we didn't touch on is when we hire new people, we're looking at a certain skill set that they have to have. But the first thing they do is they work through every other unit in the shelter before they ever touch animal protection. And this is something April and I started 6 years ago. Every new hire goes through customer service. They go through the reclaim office. Everywhere else they clean kennels, because we want them to understand the more successful they are in the field, the more they're helping the entire shelter. So one of the things we recently did, I was temporarily over customer service, and April and I have been trying to help customer service for a while because we can't stay in our lane of travel. We're not busy enough. We've long seen that they had a lot of jobs that were kind of thrown at them because nobody else really knew where to put them. Again, it was when this whole no-kill thing came through, and they needed to understand, or there's some work that had to be done that we didn't have people to do. So it kind of got thrown on our customer service people who were supposed to be adopting out animals. So when I was over it, one of the things I didn't like was they were doing our tag list, which is our reclaim list. They're calling on dogs that are on stray hold, trying to find the owners if we have any like microchip information or anything like that. Animal protection was already helping with that because we would go post addresses. If an address was known, like over-the-counter dog came in and had a microchip, we would go post that address that the dog was there and give them, X number of hours to get in and claim it, and then we'd give them some more hours. And we were giving dogs free rides home. If somebody did claim a dog but they couldn't get to the shelter, we'd give it a ride home. I don't care. Meet them at work, whatever. So April and I talked about it, and we started doing this tag list. And part of the reason it works better for me is because I have awesome people that can figure stuff out, and they'll make it more effective, which they already have. But our job already is kind of doing a lot of investigative work with all the bite investigations and all that kind of stuff that we do anyway. And so we can put better trained people on it that already have an understanding how to do it, and more effectively get information as to whether these dogs really have a home to go back to or if it's the right place. So again, it's one of those things where we saw a problem. It was, even though it was done by another department, instead of sitting there and saying, well, it doesn't work and they're doing it wrong, I just said, well, why don't we take it and let's see if we can fix it. Now, I might someday give it to another group. I don't know. But we're looking at things like that. And then another thing we started was a Missing My People campaign, because animal protection doesn't bring very many dogs into the Austin Animal Center. It's mostly over the counters, and that's where April and I have really struggled with this. Where are they coming from? Why are they coming here? Why are these not dogs that are being reported to us? And why can we chase dogs home, but they jump in everybody else's trucks? They run from me, but they jump in other people's cars. So we started this campaign, and it's a collaboration with our Maddie's Fund neighborhood level program team, the outreach team, our council offices, and animal protection. And what it is we're using data. We're looking at areas of high intake or potentially high intake, and then we're targeting those neighborhoods, and we're going out, and eventually we hope to build it into a volunteer initiative. But we go out, we just start knocking on doors and saying, hey, these are dogs that were picked up in this neighborhood. They're still at the shelter. Do you know whose dog it is? And it seems really simple, but if it gets dogs out of the shelter back home where they belong, and it also helps those people in the neighborhood understand that we are there for them and that we actually are doing things for them and their pets. It's amazing how many people within a mile of the shelter don't know where the shelter is. We've been there 7, 8 years. They'll say, oh, I heard there's a new shelter. It's like, well, it's 8 years old. But we do these targeted grassroots approach, connecting pets with their people. It's a lot of canvassing in the street, and sorry, I lost my place. Currently, we're trying to identify pathways for dogs. I'm sorry, I gotta stop. I've been really under the weather, so that's why I'm not on my top of my game. We're trying to also figure out pathways for dogs that have legal designations in the shelter. And this is another way animal protection helps, because we, again, do those dangerous, vicious dog investigations. We're trying to work with members of the behavior team, the leadership team, and animal protection to try to find dogs that might be at a high risk for euthanasia because of behavior or some kind of incident that happened. And by working together with everybody that has information that's pertinent to that dog's outcome needs to be at the table. If I know about a dog that's been at large several times or maybe has bit numerous times, and animal protection has done the bite investigations and we've done the vicious dog investigations, and we have a rescue group that wants to come in and foster this dog in, Terrytown, Austin, with a non-fenced yard, I need to tell them. They need to have that information. And amazing as much as we document everything, not everybody sees what's been documented in our database. So we have to be very diligent about how we're doing things. And when we work together, it's as collaborative as we can be, and in a very professional, focused reason for it. We successfully divert intake. Again, we talked about return in the field. I think the last time I checked, 6 or 7% diversion through return in the field. And again, we covered the cost savings of the, thank you. I actually have pneumonia, so you should all feel sorry for me. I just had to throw that out there. I got nothing. The cost savings associated with return to the field, again, that's any size shelter or any size animal protection unit. You know, even if it's a police-based animal protection unit or animal control unit, if RTO in the field for my staff is 19 minutes average time, every RTO. So when they come to the shelter, it averages an hour. If they bring one dog or they bring 3 dogs, they're going to be at the shelter at least an hour because there's people there to talk to that they know. There's lunch, there's all that other stuff. There's cleaning their truck. So we save time on man hours also by returning to the field. And again, it's that conversation that we can have with people. And what better way to be an awesome hero to them than to bring their dog back home or to meet them at work with their dog and you know, share that special moment with them. I had one officer last year, every time he did an RTO in the field, he'd take a picture if they'd allow it, and then he'd stick it on my door. I was hoping to cover my whole door with photos. But, you know, that's a heartwarming place to be, and for the stress of animal protection, and they're constantly going, they're constantly running, when they can have that moment to share with a family, that returning of that pet, and to see the thankfulness and to feel that thankfulness. I mean, they're getting hugs from some of these people. I'm not a big hugger, but you know, when somebody's that grateful to you that they want to give you a hug, that's again building that community trust and bringing home the fact that we really do care about these animals and we really mean protection. You know, it's not, we're not dog catchers. I'm only a dog catcher on a good day, but if we can get their animal back to them and share that with them, it also helps with the emotional well-being of our officers. Time spent in engagement activities in the field has shown that the more time we spend with people, the less time we have to be there again. They actually know that we care about them. They know that we mean what we say. When we say we're going to be back and check on them, they know we're going to be back. And that all leads to successful resolution of neglect and prospective nuisance complaints. You know, we have a neglect officer, and their whole job is to try to keep anything from going to cruelty. So we constantly are working with people to try to mitigate it as soon as we can, to nip it in the bud before it becomes something bigger. Another thing we do, and we didn't mention it here, is when we have hoarders, we try to work with them to do a slow release of those animals. So if we do have to take them into the shelter, we can try to bring them in a few at a time. If they're in a healthy situation where it's just sheer numbers and the animals are safe in the environment, we can do it slowly over time and work with rescue groups to try to bring those animals in so we don't overwhelm the shelter. And just as for instance, last week, 2 weeks ago, we had a hoarding situation and we knew there was going to be a bunch of animals coming in. And when I called to the back, to the vet services and animal care and told them what was going on, we had our little meeting, they were all like, oh, cool, we got space, not a problem. And in the past, when April and I would call them, it was like we got daggers thrown at us. We got this stuff thrown at us. We had to react. It might be 30 dogs coming in, but we didn't have a choice. You know, if a deputy called and said, hey, you got to come get them, we had to come get them. So because we've done such a good job of talking to staff and helping them understand what we do in the field to avoid intake, they know that when we call, just the other day we had 7 animals come in, I think it was Friday, on an eviction. They knew that there was nothing we could do about it. It just was what it was, and they're going to deal with it, and they're okay with it. And that helps us be able to do our job better because we know we're not going to be held, you know, to an unreal standard by the staff within the shelter. So the better you can understand what's going on in the shelter and the better they understand what we're doing in the field, it just helps everybody work in a more collaborative effort.